capitalist ideology, such as libertarianism, is built on the idea of property rights. In their worldview, property rights are absolute, and it even exists before the state exists in a way. And they say things like taxation is theft. And the reason why, in their worldview, property rights is the fundamental thing they need for us to be free. But what if I told you that these kind of extreme property rights can actually lead to tyranny and feudalism? And also, not only that, it's also secretly collectivists. Let me explain what I mean. Right. First, I would actually like to make a disclaimer here that the latest few videos I've made I've been criticizing capitalism, and when I mean capitalism, I often mean the extreme form of capitalism that we have today, where you can own unlimited amounts of wealth, where people view taxation as a kind of theft, etc., and that is the kind, and essentially libertarianism, which is the hardcore capitalistic ideology, essentially. So that's what I criticize. But I would like to point out also that there's many things in libertarianism even that I agree with. So it's not like I want to completely reject all of their ideas. There are many things I agree with. Like I also don't want to have taxation on labor, for example. I don't want to have. I want homeschooling to be allowed. I want free markets. I want small government. I want the right to bear arms, for example. So there are many things I like about libertarianism. So I just want to say that so people don't get the completely wrong idea. But I think it's also important to criticize an ideology where it makes a wrong step, where you can say this thing I don't agree with. So here I need to point out some criticism. So, with that said, and the key point here is that I have a fundamentally different view on exactly just property rights when it comes to, and especially land ownership is one very key area where my ideology differs fundamentally from libertarianism. So, with that said, what did I want to say? Assume that we have two persons that write a contract between them. This is an example, just to point out an absurdity about libertarian land ownership. They write a contract and they make a decision. I sell this piece of land to you, and they write a contract. It has all their names on it, etc. And now comes a third person. He didn't write He didn't write anything on that document. He didn't participate in this deal in any shape or form. But now when he goes to this piece of land, there's a guy there saying, "No, you can't use this land because I bought it." So what we have here is a kind of paradox that we have a deal that was made between two people that should somehow apply to a third person that had nothing to do with it. And you can scale this up in like in the modern world. We have, every time there's a new generation of people coming into this world, they enter this world where all the land is owned by someone, and they are told like, you can't access any of this land because we the boomers, maybe we own it all, so you can't access any of it. So I would like to point out that this is kind of the core of my criticism against libertarian views on land ownership. That it involves a person being bound by a contract that he did not sign himself. So what I want to say here is that this is actually a form of collectivism, because the people that today own everything in this world, they form a land ownership collective. They paid money for and they did things to get land and such as. So they cooperate with other people who also own land and authorities, etc. And they want all of us to engage in this essentially idea that they own all the land. But the new generation that comes into this world, for them, they never agreed to any of this. So for them, it's just a fantasy. The collectivist land ownership group. They want you to join in their collective fantasy, and they want you to agree to, yeah, you can't build anything here because I own it. You have to pay me your whole salary, or half of your salary, to rent this land so I can. And what I would like to point out, that this is also no different from the feudalism that we had before, when we had kings that owned the land. Because the kings would say exactly the same thing. They would say, I have land here, if you want to farm it, you have to pay tribute to me, and etc. So economically, it's equivalent to what we have today. The only difference is that the king would actually sometimes defend you and help you if you were in need. But the capitalists today, they say, no, you take care of yourself. I don't have any responsibility for you. Like the king, he swore an oath under God. I'm here to protect this people. So in many ways, I actually think feudalism is better than capitalism, because it involves loyalty. It involves an oath to fulfill a duty towards your subjects. So feudalism is in many ways better actually than, compared to the capitalists we have today. Kings of the past, they built cathedrals, they built monuments, they built cities, etc. They built schools. But the capitalists we have today, they just build bunkers in offshore tax havens and just hide all their wealth. They have not the same loyalty as a king would have. So that's that. Yeah, and but why do libertarians hold on to this idea of that you can own land? They often say I have to extend some understanding also to to the libertarian point of view, to understand what they want to achieve with this extreme land ownership idea. What they often say is that the only way you can keep the result of your labor is if you own your land. And it makes sense, like for a farmer, if he owns the land of his farm, he can farm, he can make food, and then he owns all the food he makes, and he don't have to pay rent or tax to anyone. That's fine. I agree to that. I would want such a society where people owned their workplace. But now libertarians and capitalists says, but you can own one farm, but you can own 10 farms, you can own 100 farms, you can own 1,000 farms, you can own 10,000 farms, you can own 100,000 farms. I don't know how much, if Elon Musk, he owns $1 trillion. If he bought farmlands, I don't know how many farms he could buy, but at some point it gets ridiculous. If you can own too much of everything, then suddenly you become the king. You become the king. It's no difference. Elon Musk is a king today with the money he owns, because he could buy a country and he could own that country, and he could say that everybody who lives here should pay rent to me, and it would be no difference from a king saying you should pay tax. So it's the idea that there's no limit that makes it problematic, because the libertarians set out to save their own the product of their own work, but when they gain too much ownership of too much land, they become in a position where they can steal others' work. So that's not good. So what's happening here? There's clearly something wrong here, and I would say that if you look at it, like how do the libertarian explain that you can own land, for example? They say things like you mix your labor with the land, so then you become to own it. But that's very, very abstract. Like, what does it mean? And also, first of all, it's an interesting thing. Like, that would mean that a hunter that just hunts animals from a land, he could never own it. because it doesn't work the land. He just hunts the land, so he can never own it. That's strange. Another thing is like, if you mix something with something, does that mean you own it? Like, imagine if I go to my neighbor's house, like if we were kids or something. Like if you have a bowl of candy in my neighbor's home, and I drop 3 of my own candies in his candy, does that mean I can take all his candy? Because I mixed my candy with his candy, so now it's mixed. I don't know which one was mine, so I have to take it all. So there's a lot of fishy things going on here when libertarians say that you can own unlimited amounts of land. That's very strange. From a religious perspective, like, God or universe created the land, how can you own it? So there's a lot of strange things going on about land ownership, and I'm going to make videos about that in the future. Like, there's a guy, Henry George, that had the single tax movement, and he proposed a system where the only thing that you should tax is land. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. So what would I say then? How can you protect yourself from tyrants? How can you, if you only own yourself but you can't own land, how can you protect yourself from tyranny and the product of your work? I would say the tragic realism in this is that the only thing that can set you free is your own potential for violence. That is the only thing. That is what you can use to negotiate peace and terms with tyrants. You can claim resources in this world and defend them. You can team up with other friendly people and defend those resources. So this is why the only way we can have a peaceful society where people can own the product of their work is if we live together with other people who are also kind and forgiving, that want to share an existence of peace and freedom, and then we defend ourselves against tyrants and against people who want to own everything, etc. That is what I would say is the tragic reality of it all. There's no way you can absolutely own land. You can only defend land. That is what I would say. And if you think that people like Bill Gates, etc., should be able to own a small country, and I think that's wrong. So that is why I often criticize. That is when I see some libertarians say things like taxation is theft. I think it needs to be put into context. It needs to be put in a wider context, that we live on this planet that is shared in some way, where we have resources that we each one defend. And if we defend a country together, like in the USA or Sweden or whatever, or Norway, whatever, if we have to defend a nation together, then there has to be a social contract. And in such a social contract, there should be some benefit for all people in that. So if we tax billionaires and give some people to the poor, then it's all fair game, I would say. But of course, if you want to renegotiate the social contract, then fine, we can, but then it's like we're ending civilization. We go to war. We start to fight over who should own more land and who should not own less land, etc. So that's kind of the story about what I would like to say about this. If you have any comments about this, please leave a comment below. And also, I would remind, if you want to learn more about my ideas in general, I have a link in the description below to some of the texts I've written. Both, there's one text about neutral democracy that describes and there's one text about a more religious text that describes my reformation of Christianity. So that's a tip. You can check those out also. Thanks and bye bye.